when you're playing big for an organization like MLB and smashing records left, right, and center, you kind of do make some enemies along the way, and sometimes they can even be the ones closest to you. Don't believe me? Well, keep watching to find out which MLB teammates hate each other's guts. Starting off with a tale as old as time, Evan Longoria and BJ Upton. Now, the Tampa Bay Rays were once one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. I mean, it was a long time ago anyway, like back in the early to mid 2000s, but they were still considered the best. And of course, back then, the team owed much of its success to outfielder BJ Upton and their third baseman Evan Longoria. However, even though the Tampa Bay Rays were like a well-oiled machine back then, things weren't exactly as smooth between the star players. And I know some of you would have loved to see this turn into a rivals turn the best friends trope. It was actually far from that. You see, BJ and Evan were like the cream of the crop, super talented and all, but they were never on the best of terms with one another, because despite being the top dogs, they both wanted to be their coach's favorite. And of course, that could have only happened if one of them was worse than the other. And that's exactly what happened in 2010, when the third baseman called out Upton for being lazy and not doing his job properly, which obviously ended up pissing him off and led to a pretty heated argument between the two. This, of course, aggravated their rivalry even further, and the two couldn't even stand each other. Now, the thing is, taking off his filter for his teammates and making sure everyone's hustling was Longoria's MO. It was his own way of toughening up his players, but I guess Upton thought different, and he ended up taking his captain's approach a bit too personally. Soon after, Upton decided he'd had enough of the toxic environment, and in 2013, he shifted to the Braves. But the toxicity didn't end at Braves either. In fact, the animosity was so subtle that I never could have guessed it. I mean, come on! The Atlanta Braves are one of the oldest teams to exist in the MLB, so you can't really expect there not to be any chemistry or unity between their players. I mean, after all, they've been at it for a couple hundred years or so some of that loyalty's gotta pass on, right? But boy, oh boy, would you imagine my surprise when I found out that things weren't exactly as they seemed to be. You see, Freddie Freeman and Ronald Acuna Jr. never exactly got along. In fact, most people in the community call them the worst of rivals in the MLB. But what exactly happened that made things turn out to be this bad? Well, as you know, when Freeman decided that he had to free himself from the Braves, he told everyone that his decision to leave was because of the complaints he had about the management and the general team culture. While there were plenty of people who understood his reasons, there were some who didn't. Some including Acuna Jr. I mean, sure, they were on the same team, wore the same uniform, and had the same training schedule. And yet, when asked what he'd missed about the former MVP, all he could say was nothing. So Ronald, all those years of teamwork, training, and those little dugout peppies meant nothing to you? Nothing? Jeez. Either the guy had hated Freeman for most of his career, or did he not want to show that him leaving had an effect on him? Maybe that was his way of dealing with the anger and hurt. But, oh boy, that's not the only way some baseball players have dealt with their anger. I mean, just ask Prince Fielder how he treated Avisail Garcia. You know, there are times when I ask myself, would Fielder have made it big if he had just tried his luck out there as a boxer and not a professional baseball player? Because heck, those blows were on fire. What went down with these two is pretty historic. So there was this rumor that Garcia was having an affair, and not just any affair, you guys, but he was having an affair with Prince Fielder's wife. Now, that's one rumor that no husband wants to hear ever, and definitely not a guy who's known by millions around the world. So what did Prince do once the news broke out? Well, the first baseman did what he did best. He struck as hard as he could, just not the ball, or on the pitch. Instead, he struck at Garcia, in the Tigers locker room, and as you know, there's always that one guy trying to break up the fight. And sadly for Miguel Cabrera, the guy ended up being him. What's worse is that initially, he was just supposed to help Fielder confront Garcia, but little did he know that by help, he'd basically end up becoming Fielder's human shield. Now, even after the feud had sort of died down a bit, Fielder was still pretty mad that Garcia was on the team. And then somewhere down the line, Garcia was eventually traded to the Chicago White Sox before the season had ended. But the damage had already been done. The rumors were true. Garcia had left, and soon after, Fielder left the Detroit Tigers too, divorcing his wife later. So much for bro code, right? Now, speaking of lights, this next one's pretty legendary too. Most OG MLB fans would know that Ty Cobb and Sam Crawford never got along. I mean, it's pretty much set in stone at this point, and I know the newer generations have had their fair share of differences too, but these guys, they're like Stone Age baseballers. Okay, fine, maybe that's an exaggeration, but as you all know, old-time baseball rivalries are often the fiercest ones, because nowadays, it's pretty tough for a player to get away with pettiness on the field. But back then, men used to go to war, and in the old days, ditching your TV shows for some good old MLB drama was everyone's favorite pastime. So when Crawford and Cobb went at each other, despite having a student-mentor relationship, everyone tuned in. Because even though these guys were like 7 years apart, things had gotten so bad between the two that they started calling each other out on their failures and would drag each other under the bus whenever they got the chance to. So, like, imagine you swear at your long-term teacher out in front of the entire press and media, and unsurprisingly, they don't hold back either, and swear right back at you. Absolutely wild, not gonna lie. Maybe Crawford should have also taught Ty some manners, but I guess this one's on Cobb too. Although rivalries in the MLB are pretty much rampant at this point, so it's not a surprise that these two hitters have had some of the worst ones. That's right, Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent had it out for each other too. Maybe it was fate that both of them were in the San Francisco Giants, because the two of them definitely had trouble containing their mammoth-sized egos. Like, make it make sense. They've played a regular season game, and bam, they shove each other like they want to show it to the world how much they hate each other. Like, okay guys, we see you. I mean, no one bought tickets to see this, but we see you. And from what I see, their dueling egos became their undoing in the end. But I guess when you're playing for the MLB and are pretty much a god with a baseball bat, there's nothing that can stop you. And that's all for the greatest rivalries in the MLB. See you in the next video.
Side corner at the knees. The ball game is over, and the Giants have won the next.